Hey gang, welcome to episode 17 of the Witch Awakening podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Rippey, a spiritual awakening and confidence coach for witchy women who want to heal old wounds, step into their full power, tap into their desires, and manifest the most magical life. Okay, so today we have something a little different. We have a special guest. Her name is Gwen Walsh, and she is freaking amazing and also beautiful. So let's jump into it. We'll do all the intros in the episode. Here we go.
All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to the podcast. This week we have a friend of mine, Gwen Walsh, and she is going to be talking about ethical love magic. So I'm going to let her do an intro and we will get started. Hi, Gwen.
Hello. Hi, Melissa. Thank you for having me on here today. So, hi, everybody that's listening. My name's Gwen. I am a sex educator, a tarot reader, a mentor, and a lot of people know me as the Love Witch. So, I love talking about everything sexuality, spirituality, love, intimacy, psychology, all of that good stuff, and kind of weaving it all together to help people find their most confident, happy, and inspired selves.
Love that. Love it. Love it. So tell me about what it is that you're going to talk to us about today.
So today we're going to talk about ethical love magic. There's a lot of sensationalizing and stuff of that ilk with love magic, with magic in general and witchcraft, and with sexuality, and kind of where I come from in terms of my ethics with sexuality and spirituality is normalizing instead of sensationalizing, and taking all of these subjects, this big kind of umbrella of subjects of love and magic and sexuality and witchcraft, and taking them from this kind of very sensationalized, taboo sort of place, and kind of transferring them, translating them into things that we can practically apply and personalize, and feel like we can integrate them into our own lives in a way that works for us, that makes sense for us, and that helps each individual feel uniquely fulfilled and self-actualized in that way.
I love that so much. That is kind of, I think, why I was drawn to your message and like how you deliver your messages. I do a lot of the same thing, not with the sex part of it, so to speak. I do like have a little bit of that in there, but just normalizing like witchcraft and making it, I don't know, taking the taboo and the scary and the all the things, right? Like taking all of the, I don't know, stereotypes out of it and making it more accessible to people that want to participate. So I love that. I love that. All right. So let us know, like, do you, well, first of all, I have a question. Do you use a lot of like sex magic, love magic stuff in your personal practice?
So it really depends on my lifestyle. So I like to talk about this, especially in terms of the way the world is now. So for myself, when the pandemic began, all of my family moved back in together because my mom was going through a health thing at the time, and with all of the unknowns about COVID at the time and everything, we were like, we can either be separate for however long, or we can be together for however long. And we didn't know how serious her health concern was at the time. So she's totally fine now, but it was scary at the time. So we all moved in together. We were all working from home, and the house that we're all in, which we're still all four of us in this house, is not big enough for four independent, fully grown adults. So at this point, I do not integrate a lot of what you would consider the stereotypical or well-known types of sex magic and love magic, because to be honest, I don't have the privacy to do so. And within that, it's given me a greater kind of more expanded understanding and nuanced understanding and practice of sex magic, sensory, sensuality magic, and love magic, because it's kind of, as much as it can be frustrating sometimes to not have all of the space and time that and privacy that I would want to do my magic practice in whatever way I want to. It's also been kind of a good challenge in the sense of, okay, I have this very limited capacity and capability to practice magic, to practice my spirituality. And I really can't practice it in the way that is most well known. So, how do I integrate this aspect of my practice that is a big part of my career, a big part of my teaching and education into my life when I'm not able to do it in the way that you would typically see in movies and media and books and all of that? So that's been like a unique and special opportunity for me to gain a more subtle and nuanced understanding of what does sex magic and pleasure magic and love magic look like when I don't have the capability to be doing the traditional, like lying in your bed having orgasms for 6 hours at a time, or, you know, doing this ornate altar candle magic ritual because my dad hates it when I burn candles in the house. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Going off of that, I'm just curious because I know that a lot of your branding and like a lot of your like visuals and stuff are very on the sexual side, which is amazing. I think they're freaking gorgeous, by the way. So love that. But like, how do you, like, does your family have an opinion about like your social media? Do they follow your social media and like get all up in that?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like, to be honest, the reason that most of my branding photos are like me in lingerie or something of that ilk is because one of my closest friends, who's also my photographer. So she and I do photo shoots together and I give her tarot readings. And that's like our nice little trade. We've been friends for years. And so like it works for us. And usually when we do photo shoots, it's like, oh, you know, what do you want to do? Like me asking her, like, what's her vision? Because it's adding for her portfolio and her creative endeavors as well. And so usually it ends up being like a vision of let's do some sort of a lingerie shoot, like show off my collection or um, do some sort of like creative vision that she has. And I was looking at, because every time I do a launch, I go through all my promo photos to see what fits for the offering that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, geez, I really need some promo photos that are not me 90% naked because it really doesn't work for some situations. It really doesn't work for sex negative platforms like Instagram and Facebook. And so I kind of laughed to myself about that like, wow, I really need some promo photos where I have clothes on. But anyway, yeah, my family has had various phases of opinions throughout the years. When I was, oh boy, it was maybe a couple, 2, 3 years ago. My mom was very much like, you shouldn't do this anymore. Like when I first, going way, way back, when I first got offered a job as a sex educator at a sexuality boutique, AKA sex toy store, my mom didn't want me to take it. She was like, that's going to look bad on your resume. Like that's going to like bring you down in terms of your career and your career opportunities. And I was like, no, I really don't think so. And to give some context, I was a women's studies major in college. I was an intern and then a volunteer leader at Planned Parenthood. And so it wasn't like I just decided to do this out of the blue, which it's not a problem if someone does decide that, but it made even more sense to me because it was along the career trajectory that I was already developing for myself. So my mom had that opinion. And then as I expanded into Instagram and kind of going out on my own, she didn't like if I would post like a medical diagram of a vulva or something like that and talk about like the educational, like this is the clitoris, you know, it's not just this tiny little externally visible button. It actually looks more like a wishbone and it has legs, extends and XYZ. And she was like, that's really inappropriate. Like you shouldn't post that kind of stuff and XYZ. And we got into a lot of arguments about it. It was hard. It definitely was hard. And then as she came to understand more why I was doing this, that I wasn't just, posting sensual pictures of myself on the internet to get attention. I wasn't just posting pictures of, medical diagrams of vulvas to get attention or to shock people. It was because I really cared about helping people to find more confidence and to have that education within themselves so that they could know and understand their bodies instead of feeling shameful and unaware. She kind of came around and was like, oh, okay, like you're serious about this. And again, like it doesn't matter why people do the things that they do. I don't think it does. But for her, having that understanding from my perspective helped her to really familiarize herself and be like, okay, like I can understand why my daughter is doing these things. And I still have like the stray aunt or uncle that like doesn't get why I post certain things. And I've had conversations with, my mom, my dad about like, why did you post this certain thing on Instagram? Like it doesn't make sense to me, or I don't get why you would do that. And so I explain it to them. And it was very similar with the spirituality stuff too. My mom took my first tarot deck away from me because she thought I was summoning demons with it. And now after every tarot reading that I do, she's like, how did it go? Did they feel like it was helpful? Blah, blah, blah. And so it's a very different, I'm very proud of my family for being open and receptive to wanting to understand why I do what I do, because not a lot of people are like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about how old your parents are, but I feel like some of that's probably generational too, don't you? Like I'm in my 40s, so even my generation gets a little like funny about sex and money, and like because we were definitely raised in a very masculine. The 80s were super masculine time frame. They were just, it was like work, 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 and nobody talks about anything because it's nobody's business, right? Like, and so we were raised in that, and so I mean, I have kids that are pretty close to your age, and so it's fun to watch the different attitudes about just all of this stuff, spirituality and sexuality, and even with all the new kind of shifts that are happening in society right now about I don't know, wokeness, right? Just being more like kind of politically correct, and learning, all of the ways that we've kind of kept people in boxes, right? It's been interesting for me to see how generations have been handling that. It's very different.
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. I'm proud of them too. That's amazing, because I know a lot of people my age and older are just not here for any of that. They're just like, no. What are you doing? Don't do that. No. Because I know my dad, even, I posted a picture and it was literally just me. I was in a sweater, had like an off the shoulder thing, and I had like my underwear on, but you couldn't see my underwear. You could see like my thigh near my butt, right? Like just not even the full butt. It was me sitting there like that. And my dad was like, excuse me. I was like, Dad, it's not like, dude, I'm not even sure. Literally just me sitting there in a sweater. Like, what are you doing? Okay. So anyway, so I totally see how that is playing out too. And it can be pretty crazy sometimes. And the witchy stuff really freaks people out. But I think like you said, that they give them time, right? Like for anyone that's posting this stuff or is like terrified of posting this stuff, just do it. If it feels right to you and you're cool with it, go for it. And the people around you will come around, don't you think? Like they'll, or they won't. I mean, maybe not, but you have to be okay with that either way.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is I think that I hope that, and what I attempt to or aspire to do with my work is to offer people kind of an alternative way of thinking, if you will, because I think that our society can kind of have these pendulum like swings into one extreme or the other. And so obviously I have not I've only lived in my time frame of 1995 to now. So I don't have personal experience in all of these other realms, but it seems like throughout history, there's kind of been a swing of like, either, we don't talk about sex at all, and then there's a swing into like hypersexuality. And I feel like, thinking about it now, especially where we have social media and we have access to everyone's opinion about every single thing all of the time, it can be really intellectually and cerebrally overwhelming. And so I think that it's really important to, whether it's sex positivity or spirituality positivity or whatever, there's this kind of swing now, at least that I see in the communities I'm a part of, that if you're not super duper sexual, then it's like, well, what's wrong with you? Whereas before it was like, if you were super duper sexual, it was like, what's wrong with you? And so I think now it's important to have this kind of new ethic of thinking of what feels right for me and how can I tolerate both myself and others, and understand where they're coming from, and also maintain that critical thinking of, I'm allowed to agree with certain things, I'm allowed to disagree with certain things, and I can hold both of those truths simultaneously. Because I think that where a lot of people get tripped up is whether it's a certain type of spirituality or a certain relationship style or sexuality style, there can kind of be this like, well, if you don't totally agree with me, I feel that that's threatening. When I think it's a much healthier and more sustainable way of thinking of, okay, this is what's meaningful for me, and this is why. And somebody else's relationship style, I don't have to understand it. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to take it on as my own, but I can tolerate that as long as they're not harming me or other people, that it's okay for them to do what feels right for them. And that doesn't negate what feels right for me. And my friend and I were just talking about this with religion last night, that like certain people love Jesus and see him as like number one superstar in their religious life. And that's awesome. And I can see that and understand that. Jesus is not the only person at my party spiritually. I work with the Morrigan, I work with Aphrodite, with Hades, all of these deities. And I think that if people, again, can tolerate that, like, okay, your gods are different than mine, and that's okay. Just because you don't believe that my gods are real doesn't mean that they're not. And it, even if all of this is fake, quote unquote, not real, does that really matter? Because my spirituality adds to my life in a positive way. So it doesn't really matter if it's provably real or not, just like it doesn't really matter if astrology is real or not, or any of this stuff, sex magic, whatever, because the impact is positive. And so I can tolerate that this could be real or not, because the impact that it has and the way that it fulfills people and adds to their lives is real. So big, long tangent, but that's been on my mind a lot recently. And I think that that way of thinking, involving that kind of critical thinking, critical inquiry, and that tolerance for others' perspectives is really important.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that that's the lesson right now, right? Tolerance. Don't you feel like that's a huge lesson for just globally right now, kind of for everyone? I think the pandemic really was a catalyst for that. Helping everybody get out of their own box, get out of their own like reality and realize, oh crap, there's so much else going on around the world, and I know I have seen, and I think you probably would agree with this, that like witchiness and being aware of witches and like witchcraft is sort of on an upswing, that more people are coming to it and like hearing the call and being like, yeah, okay, what's this thing like? And it's being more, I guess, socially acceptable. At least in my circle, it has definitely opened up quite a bit since I started first talking about it in the last few years. I think people are just looking for something, right? They're just like looking for something to help fulfill all those holes that were illuminated over the last few years when we had nothing better to do than to sit around and just think and examine our lives, right? So yeah, hold up that mirror. But I want to transition back to love magic and sex magic, and let's dig into the ethical part of that. Like, I know we probably have similar opinions on this, just because I've been paying attention to your to your stories and stuff, and the way you work. But tell me, just what are your thoughts on ethical use of all magic, but specifically like love magic?
Yeah, so my opinion, I'm getting a weird echo. Maybe?
I don't hear it on my side, so
it's gone now. Oh well. The spirits are coming to visit us.
Yeah.
So my opinion on magic in general, and it's okay if other people have different opinions, but the way that I personally practice is that my magic involves myself, working on myself, developing myself, and I don't involve other people in my magic, my spells, whatever, unless they are actively consenting. So if somebody like I used to do like bespoke spell work for people, and so they would come to me and ask me to create a spell for them. And so in that case, yes, absolutely. But when I'm just doing magic myself, it is always around who am I, like, what is the identity I'm embodying? What is the energy I'm embodying in order to obtain this result that I want? And what is the kind of environment, like the spiritual environment that I'm creating? So it's me working on myself and my environment instead of like, I'm going to manipulate that person to do my bidding, because I personally don't feel comfortable with that. And I wouldn't want to do that. It's kind of like, if anyone here is watching that or listening that has seen the movie The Love Witch, that is one of my favorite movies ever. And if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it if you feel called. I love it so much because it's such a great campy, dramatic illustration of like the most stereotypical love magic gone wrong. And that's why I love it, because it's like a commentary on, women's roles and stereotypes under patriarchy and all this stuff. And so even though it's campy, like it has, unfortunately, a lot of truth to it about how like women kind of become the stereotypes that patriarchy assigns them because of the pressure, the difficulty, all of that. And one of the aspects of that movie was kind of when you do a love spell on someone, how wrong it can go. And so personally, I would never want someone to have their free will compromised, because why would you want that? I would want someone who is going to naturally love me of their own free will. And if they ever decide to leave, that's of their own free will. And if they decide to stay, that's of their own free will. So my love spells, specifically for love spells, always involve either more like a road opening spell, if you will, or an attraction spell based on myself, basically allowing myself to radiate that magnetism, allure, attraction, whatever, that type of energy, that sort of like Marilyn Monroe type of energy, if you will, in whatever way is authentic to me.
Yeah, that's exactly. So I used to do spells for people as well. I don't right now, but and I had a love spell in quotes, right? But it was literally the same thing. And I would tell people, this is not like your traditional, like you see in the movies, love spell to manipulate someone. Like you said, it was exactly what you just said. It was to open, it was to remove any blocks that you've been putting in your own way, right? Energetically, to kind of cut all those cords and remove those for you, and then to help you like send the bad signal out saying, hey, I'm open to receive love, so that it can attract the people that are meant to flow into your life, again, of their own free will. It had nothing to do with anyone else's energy, like you said. And I had a few people kind of mad about it. They were just like, that's not a love spell. And I'm like, it is though. I mean, it's just not what you expected. But I love that. Yeah, no, I figured they would be similar, but pretty much right on. It sounds like, because that was how I explained mine too to people. It's just that, like, listen, this is not going to necessarily, like, I want so and so to come over here and love me. You know, like that's not what I do either. So
Yeah, it is interesting how people relate to control, how we simultaneously want to control everything and we also want to give up control, which is, it's interesting to see how certain people, certain spiritual circles talk about the universe, how some people talk about the universe as like, the universe always has my back and like everything's happening for me, not to me, and all of that. And then on the other side of things, there's the perspective that the universe doesn't give a shit about you. And that's a good thing because there's not some predestined, like we're not living in Calvinist Salem, Massachusetts, like 1692. There's not some predestined fate for you, that we each have control of our own fate. And there's nothing else, you know, working and conspiring for us. We conspire for ourselves. And that's such a good thing because we can choose to put all our intention or our energy to a certain career path, a certain partnership, a certain whatever. And the universe isn't going to be like, no, actually over here, you suck, too bad.
yeah.
And it's also scary because as much as we want control, we're also like, what? I have to decide everything. I have to, you know, I'm the only one that's going to be in my corner with this. And so I think that it's very similar with love spells, that we simultaneously want to control things of like, well, I want that person to be in love with me. So I want you to do a love spell so that the universal forces can make that person love me. And at the same time, we want to give up control to whatever that universal magical force is, because we don't want to actually have to have the hard conversations with that person, except if that person just is not going to be the one for us, have to go out and, you know, be open to building a relationship with someone else. So it's very fascinating how love spells are such a kind of beacon, a light shed upon humans' simultaneous need to have control and need to release control. Don't mind me psychoanalyzing people
no,
about
I
love
love
spells.
that. I love it. Yeah, no, totally true. Because I even had a client come to me several times asking kind of the same questions, you know, about the love spell. Basically, I think she was trying to see if I would change my mind, but you know, and I just had to keep re-explaining, like, no, still this, like, this is still how I work. And, you know, there are people out there, if you want to go find them, that will do the other kind of spell for you for sure. You can always find what you're looking for if you go look. But
and it's interesting how people like, we kind of have this, like, if you want to call it hubris, you know, as humans, that, oh, well, I want this person to fall in love with me. So like, because I'm special and like I'm the center of my own universe, I think that it's okay for them to fall in love with me against their will. But if it was someone else saying that about us, we'd be like, what the fuck? No, I don't want someone to make me fall in love with them. And so it's so interesting how humans think and operate in that way. It's just very fascinating. And it makes sense. Like, each of us is the center of our own universe, our own world. It's understandable. And also, I think it's important to have that objectivity about, again, the ethics of the situation, which is why I do love spells the way that I do them, because it allows those ethics to stay intact, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that goes before I even explored my like witchiness. When I was just doing readings way back, I still had the same basic, you know, ethical thing, that it's not ethical to tap into somebody's energy without permission. It's not ethical to send healing without someone's permission. Like, people are, oh, I'm sending you healing vibes. Well, I didn't ask you to do that. Maybe I don't want you to, you know. I always, you know, you wouldn't walk up to someone on the street and just start giving them a massage, or like, you know, just doing any of that weird stuff, right? Like giving them a medical exam. Like, you wouldn't just like walk up to somebody and start doing that without permission. So why would you do it energetically? Like, I feel very strongly that that is not okay. And you should always obtain permission before doing anything to anyone else. And I know you touched on that a little bit, but, and then especially when I went into like Magick, I was like, okay, look, this is like next level stuff, right? Like, not that, energy healing and all of that is also very powerful, but, with Magick, I mean, you can really fuck up some stuff, if you're just in there messing around. And I don't really practice baneful magic either. For the most part, I will do like a binding spell, but it's more just a protection, like keep them away from me kind of thing. It's not really like let the universe kind of handle the rest of that, like whatever karma they have coming, that's on them. But so I mean, as far as I would go with someone else and have done is just like protection spells or like binding them from doing harm to like me or so I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but that's been pretty important in my practice too.
Yeah. And I understand, I do want to contextualize this with, I understand historically with certain groups of people, especially historically marginalized peoples, the need for baneful magic. That is completely understandable. And so I do want to say that like anyone who is like, oh, well, I actually disagree, like there's a need for baneful magic, like that is totally fine. It just happens to not be part of my practice. I have my own way of thinking and feeling and being because of who I am, because of my own personal experience. And so I think the thing I would emphasize here is to have that personal reflection on what do I feel is right for myself as an individual and why. Because I can totally see the need for baneful magic, especially historically, thinking about all of the things that have happened in the world to specific peoples, like that is totally understandable. I have not been part of those things in my personal experience, so I've never had the need to do anything like that. Again, personally, like the closest thing I would say that I've done is, again, a binding spell. And it was basically a binding spell of somebody that I was involved with at the time. It was basically a binding spell of this person can no longer tell me lies, basically, like if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything, except if you don't have anything honest to say, don't say anything. And unbinding spells are pretty frequent for me because in my practice, the way that I've learned things is when you do a binding spell on someone, you bind them to you magically, karmically, whatever. And so it is important to do an unbinding spell when you're like, okay, I don't need to protect myself from this person saying lies to me anymore because I know that I'm not going to believe them anyway. So it doesn't matter to me anymore. I'm going to unbind myself. And so a lot of people that come to me for like, how do I do this? How do I do that? Spell work wise, I will send them an unbinding spell that they can do because a lot of the times, not in every case, but in many cases, that's what needs to be done is like not doing anything to that person, but letting go of that person's tie to the other person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a cord cutting would be in the shamanic world. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Because with all other types of baneful magic, at least in my own experience, in my own world, there's no reason for me to do baneful magic on other people. There's always another step that I can take, if that makes sense.
Totally. And I wanted to add my 2 cents also that I totally agree with you. Like, I am not against baneful magic. I just, like, you have never really had the need to use it. I think I did, I guess you would call it a hex or a curse on an abusive spouse for a client of mine. I mean, it was getting really scary and really kind of crazy. So it was more of a binding with, and as far as the curse goes, it was more like, if he does anything, let the universe / karma kind of come to him quickly. That was about as serious as I got with that. But I would say that's probably about as close as I've ever gotten to using, darker magic. But, and again, it's like you, I've just never had a reason to use it. I find it fascinating. I love to like read stories about it and like the history of that and how it worked into populations in the past, which I think is fascinating. If you've ever read about it or haven't read about it, you should go, look that up and read about it. But yeah, I really don't have the need for it either. So that's the only reason I don't use it, is just because I don't feel like I need to. So nothing against anybody who enjoys it or wants to do it. That's fine. If that's your practice, do it. Like, I'm not here to tell people how to work their magic. So like,
and the other part of it too is like, I'm just not an expert in it. I think expertise is a really important thing to consider, that I have my areas of expertise. Like, I happen to know a bit about sex education. I happen to know a bit about tarot. And so those are the areas that I'm comfortable helping people with spells and things like that. Absolutely. But I am not highly trained in baneful magic. I have personally never sought it out. So I'm not going to act like I'm an expert and help people with something that I really would just be conjecturing and messing around with. And that's another big part of it is, for myself, again, I've never had a need to use baneful magic because I've never happened to be in a situation in that sense, because it's always been like, oh, well, I can just have a conversation with that person. I can just, take whatever action in the non-magical world. And I think that for myself, magic is an energetic ally and amplifier to my real world action, if you will, my physical world action. So like, I'll, apply for a scholarship and do a spell for good luck. I will do a road opening spell and go to that networking event, But for many people, you can't just have a conversation with your abuser. You can't just, get tea with somebody who is physically endangering you and mediate it. You just can't do that. And so I think that if there is a practical solution to do before doing the magic, especially if it's baneful, definitely. And if not, that's understandable.
Yeah, totally. I do the same thing. Like, taking real, we do live in a 3D world. So like taking the 3D action, but also like giving it that extra with the magic, whatever it is you're doing behind the scenes with the magic. What are your thoughts on, I'm going to totally shift like
Love it.
into something else, but this just popped into my head about like with sex magic. What are your thoughts on, even with consent, using someone else's like fluids and like, I don't know, hair, whatever it is you're using? Like, what are your thoughts on that as far as love magic goes?
Yeah. So with something like that, my question is always why, because I feel like people love doing things because they can, but especially with magic, they're not to sound condescending or anything, but some people just don't know. They're new to this, and that's okay. We've all been new to things at some point. It's really important to have respect for the discipline of magic, for the power of magic and energy work and all of that. And so this goes back to like, you see all of the, maybe you don't, but I do, because my friends send them to me all the time. All of these headlines about like Megan Fox and Machine Gun Kelly drinking each other's blood. Mm-hmm. And my question is always, why? Like, you can, but should you? Is there a reason? And that's kind of what I ask is like, are you doing sex magic involving another person's fluid or hairs or whatever for a certain purpose? Or is it just because you can? Mm-hmm. And there could definitely be a purpose if it's, for, I don't know, conception, if it's for, I don't know, whatever else. Clearly, I haven't had a lot of reasons to do this, so I can't really think of any reasons. The only reasons that I've, talked to people about in that way are like conceiving, and things like that. But with everything else, it's kind of like, why would you do that? Like, what are the practical steps that you could take, if you want to like heal a conflict? Like, maybe have a conversation before you do a sex magic spell, because that's probably going to help facilitate your desired result more. And again, we go back to this kind of like control thing of people want to have control, but they don't want to actually do anything. They also want to give up control to like the universe or the magical forces instead of having to actually do anything themselves. And that's not to say all people, that's just an aspect of human nature that most of us have or have experienced. And so with something like, that's why I always go back to solo sex magic. That is my preference. That's the emphasis that I have on my personal practice and my education that I give to other people, because I do think that there is a very real purpose in having a sex magic practice with yourself, developing that sexuality, developing that sexual identity, especially because sexual sovereignty and agency and knowing yourself sexually, having that holistic self-intimacy is something that has been taken away from a lot of us, something that has been discouraged from a lot of us. And I think that that is a very healing reclamation act. I think that it's a way to connect with yourself as a whole, being more in touch with your emotions, being more in touch with what brings you joy, with your physiology, your psychology, all of that. And it definitely is understandable to want to engage in that with a partner as well. But I think that when you are engaging with a partner in a magical sense, as well as having their consent, making sure that you do your research, that you have an understanding of, what are the energetic implications involved in partnered sex magic. If it's someone that, you maybe don't have a very strong foundation with anyway, it could make things more messy. Maybe it won't, but it potentially could. And so I think that just like some people might think, oh, if I have a baby with this person, it'll fix our relationship. Or if we just get married, it'll fix our relationship. It's kind of, you can't put the cart before the horse. Like, it's important to have a strong foundation emotionally in the, as you said, 3D world, in the physical world. And then the magical aspect can be an addition and an amplifier on top of that. Whereas if there's not a strong emotional, physical plane world relationship, the magic may be an amplifier of the difficulties and the challenges that are already present in the physical world.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, to me, it seems like if you're using a physical part of someone, like a piece of their DNA, that's like a binding energetic contract, between the two of you, if you, especially if you're using both yours and theirs together, like in the same vessel. I mean, you essentially just combined your DNA, right? And like, now you're using it for whatever you're using it for. I love that, like the why thing, like, what is the purpose for this? Like, are you doing it just because it's fun, it sounds cool, or is there an actual reason? To me personally, I think that would be almost a last resort, just because, like you said, energetically, it can really kind of fuck things up, because, it just is a really powerful thing to use, especially like a physical part of someone else. And it just sort of, I mean, you would, to me, what was coming to mind is you would have to do like an unbinding with that if you ever wanted to reverse it or cancel it out, because you just combined, your stuff, or use someone else's stuff and energetically kind of tied them to you and your magic and your energy. So it's a big deal. I think that's really important. Like, I love that, the asking the why first. Really. And I love the part about, self-exploration and really getting to know yourself and your body. And especially like with us older generations, I know my generation, it was definitely like, don't touch that. Don't do that. Like, what are you doing? No. I know I've been really, that's something I was really, that was important to me when mothering my own children, was letting them know, like, that's your body. You're allowed to do what you want to do with it. Now there are a few social rules, like we should probably not do that in front of other people and not like in public, like sort of, keep yourself covered or whatever in front of your brothers and sisters kind of thing. But, it's perfectly fine. It's yours. You can touch it all you want, like just do it in private until you're in a consenting relationship later. Right. So
exactly. And that's the thing, is it's not because you should be ashamed because your body is bad. It's that we don't do those things in public because other people aren't consenting to witnessing that.
right.
If we're in public, those other people don't have the opportunity to consent or not.
Right.
And so I think that framing it in that sense is really important. And it's very not sexy to think about things in this way, but going back to like the why and the purpose, I think that sometimes, especially if we are in a place of emotionally uncertainty, and like historically people have always leaned into spirituality, especially alternative spiritualities, in times of social uncertainty or economic uncertainty. If we think of like the rise of seances and spiritualism at the turn of the century and all of that kind of stuff, and now seeing like the rise of witchcraft and everything, it's because people want that sense of control and that sense of collaboration with other forces, because we all as humans, we have a need to feel like we are not alone and isolated in this world, to feel like we are not purposeless beings floating around in this cosmic soup or whatever. And so practices like witchcraft and sex magic give us this feeling that we have control and that we have agency over our lives, especially if we feel like we don't have agency and control in our physical plane of our lives. And so I think that when engaging in something like sex magic, it is important to consider, again, it's not sexy, but the cost benefit analysis. Your Virgo friend here letting you know to do a cost benefit analysis of, okay, I want to engage in sex magic, for example, with a partner. What are the benefits of that? Like, what am I trying to achieve? Am I just kind of trying to fuck shit up energetically and see what happens? Or do I have a set specific purpose? And what are the potential costs of that? Like being bound to this person, maybe they're not the best person to be bound to energetically. Like, why do I feel the need to bind myself to this person? If we think of someone like Megan Fox and MGK, it's like, well, why? Like the question that I would ask is like, why do you drink each other's blood? Not that it's necessarily a bad thing. It's not a blanket statement bad thing, but I'm curious as to why, because if we think of the cost benefit within that, engaging with, consuming, etc., another person's blood carries the risk of bloodborne pathogens, STIs, things like that, that could potentially be incurable and change the trajectory of your physical health for the rest of your life. And when someone like a very impressionable younger person reads a headline like that, oh, this, emo dream celebrity couple that is selling this fantasy of the perfect celebrity emo couple drinks each other's blood. And a very impressionable person might read that, be like, oh, that sounds fun. I want to be like MGK and Megan Fox. Like, I'll go try that. It's like, hold on. Consider the why, consider the potential risks and costs of that, and consider what benefits you're trying to achieve. And I think that applies to everything that we're considering doing, whether it's magical or physical.
I loved your piece on that, by the way. I'll put your links to all your things down in the show notes so that people can go check it out. She did kind of an extensive about that, a deep dive into that, like basically what she was just saying, but she went a little deeper. So yeah,
as deep as I could for a 30-second reel.
right. But yeah, definitely go check it out, because that is that is what you said about the people that just read the, the headline and then go, especially like impressionable people, especially like younger people I'm thinking of, but like, when you're middle school, high school, you're just trying to fit in, and like, you're in the emo crowd and you see this and you're like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to go try that, and it's like, but you don't stop. They don't have that consequences part of their brain developed yet. And so it's like, just jump in and do the thing. And you're like, crap, like, because then what can happen? All the bad things, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, I think there are very few things that are blanket statement bad. I think that the extreme good and bad, like most aspects of life fit somewhere in that gray area.
Mm.
But at the same time, the important thing is not necessarily the activity itself, but the why about it. And that's what I think we need to develop more, as a global community, as people, as citizens of the world, is this intentionality of, okay, when I, consume this information on social media, the internet, whatever, am I taking the time and effort to think about it critically, to think about my perspective instead of just assuming that it's right or true? Because anyone can post anything, and anything that anyone posts can certainly have value. Like there's value in the cool, random, obscure blogs that you might find. Absolutely. And there could also be things that might not be valuable or might be actively harmful. And so I think it's really important to not blanket statement things necessarily. Of course, there are some things that are obviously wrong and harmful. But for the most part, just having this intentionality of, let me think about that for a second. Let me check in with my own values and integrity. Let me cost benefit analysis this and think critically about it. And that goes for, spiritual leaders, certain, communities, certain practices, spiritual practices, lifestyle practices, health practices, all of that. I think that intentionality and that ability to stop, I think that's a song. That's like a song lyric. Stop, wait, think about it.
Probably.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think that's Iggy Azalea.
You'll have to go Google it and see.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, totally. And I don't know, especially I think with anything related to sexuality, right? Like our sex lives and just what we're doing with our bodies and with other people's bodies. Like, I think it's always a good idea to be, because that's a really hard time to stop and think about things when you're kind of in the moment and you're like going for it. And it's like, wait a minute, hold up.
Physiologically, we are, or biologically, we are wired to have a lower, or rather a higher risk tolerance because if you think about it, like reproduction wise, if we are biologically geared towards reproducing at all costs, then we're going to have that lower awareness of risk when we're aroused. And this is like scientifically researched. We have a lower risk awareness, a higher risk tolerance, a higher grossness tolerance, if you will. So things that we might think are gross when we're not aroused, when we are aroused, we don't think of them as that gross, because again, those things have to, quote unquote, go out the window in order to achieve that objective, if you will, of reproducing. And so understanding the neuroscience of how our brains work can help us to understand, okay, I need to have the sexual health conversation before I get into the heat of the moment with this person, because I know in the heat of the moment, I'm not going to be thinking about that. That's not going to be my priority. And I say this from personal experience, like I did not have robust sex education. I went to Catholic school. I wore the knee socks, the whole bit. So I understand, having personal experience with this, having that worry and anxiety afterward, of my own sexual health and well-being and all of that. which is why I really care about helping people to understand themselves so that they can set themselves up for success. And same goes with sex magic. It's important to consider these things beforehand so that we're not acting in a way that we might not feel great about later.
Right. Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, it was awesome having you on here today. These are all so juicy. I love all of this stuff. No pun intended there, but I love all of these things that we talked about today. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share today, or are you good?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, mainly just like, I don't want to say changing the way that we think, but like adding to the way that we think, adding that critical inquiry, adding that, openness, tolerance, and also like, I know my own values, my own integrity, and like I can be open to hearing other people's perspectives. And I can be capable of taking both, things I agree and things I don't agree with. And I think that applies for like whether we're reading classical witchcraft texts like Buckland or Cunningham or even Anton LaVey or whatever. Like there are definitely things in like Buckland and LaVey's works that like would not fly by today's political correctness standards. And that doesn't mean that they're total trash, that they're useless. But if we choose to read those things, which I think there's value in them, if people find them, triggering and unvaluable, that's totally fine. But I think it's important to not just be like, oh, okay, this was written by Raymond Buckland, so it must all be true. Instead of thinking like, okay, this was written by someone who's considered to be an expert in the field at the time. I can take valuable information from this, and I can also disagree with certain things. And there's like stupid little things like I think he like didn't believe in vegetarianism. And that doesn't mean that you have to not be a vegetarian anymore because Raymond Buckland said so. But taking that time to consider like, maybe I don't agree with that, or maybe I do. And either way, that's okay. So that's all I really have to say.
Love that. Love it. Yeah. And also remembering like to whenever you're consuming information, maybe doing some research into when it was written, like what time period this was written and like what was going on at the time. That goes for blogs too. I mean, blogs that were written 10 years ago may not be very relevant now, so it's just yeah, like you said, stopping and having that critical thinking piece kick in and really like, what do I really think about this, or how do we feel about that? So I love that. Great advice. So let us know where we can find you, where people can connect with you, and send me all your links and I will definitely pop those into the show notes for everybody.
Yeah. So I mostly live on Instagram. My Instagram is at Gwen Walsh, GwenWalsh. Obviously, unfortunately, watch out for all the stupid scammer, impersonator, whatever. I wish I didn't have to say that, but here we are. Yep. So, and then my website is the same, gwenwalsh.com. And where else? I have an email list. I've got a lot of different things. And of course, if you want to interact with me in a more personal way, I do offer tarot readings and consultations. I have courses, master classes, all good stuff. So there's a bunch of opportunities to connect, to work with me if you want to. And that's about it, I think.
I love it. Yeah, you guys go check out her stuff. Her Instagram is amazing. So go. It's very empowering for like a witchy woman or man. It could be empowering for a man too. It's all about like just what we've been talking about today, being really aware and like of the self, I think is a big, like kind of generic way to describe what you're all about, but being self-aware. Well, again, thank you so much for being here today. I had an amazing time. Thank you for all the nuggets. Like there's so much goodies in here. So I will, like I said, get everything down in the show notes for everybody to go check her out. You guys go hang with Gwen for a while and we will see you next time.
Okay, so that's what I have for you today. And I hope you enjoyed that chat with Gwen Go over to Instagram and tag me in your stories with your favorite takeaway from this episode. And then go find Gwen and show her some love as well. I'll have all of the links in the show notes on where you can find her and me. And we will have a little party over there. Love it. All right, you guys. Well, that is all for today. Let's see, what do I have going on right now? I have a new offering and it's called Let's Heal. This month we'll be focusing on our old friend money. We will be using an EFT, emotional freedom technique. That's tapping, if you've seen people do that. And this will be an EFT series on common blocks, fears, and beliefs about money. And it will help clear some of those and replace them with positive things instead. So this is for you if you're stuck in a money pattern that you're tired of. Amen, right? You have fears, worries about like being able to make money, fears or worries about being able to keep money, or repeat maybe a big influx that you have had in the past. If you feel unable to receive, or that it's not safe to have or hold money. If you were told you needed money to flow through someone else. Big example in my life is a woman needs a man to make money for her, right? Hello. Or any other money story that's no longer serving you. Right now, early bird pricing is on, and it is for $33. You get this amazing healing, and it is good until May 22nd, 2022. If you hear this before that, go get you a discount. I will have the link in the show notes so you can head over and check that out. All right. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you next time. Be sure to subscribe so you can get notified when new podcasts are uploaded, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. That lets them know that you love it, and it gives us a little boost so others can find us. Stay magical, and I'll talk to you soon.